This video is the contrast portion of CRAP, otherwise known as contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. And for this presentation, it will be CRAP as it applies to web design. So we're going to start with contrast. Contrast is one of the most effective ways to add interest. It draws attention, there's no doubt about it. Some rules of contrast: it has to be obvious. If two items are not exactly the same, make them different, but really different. And my rule for that is just don't be a wimp. And it can be easy to be a wimp, so you want to make sure that your contrast is significant. And we'll have some examples of that here in just a little bit. So the first form of contrast for web design is contrast in color. So when we think of color, we think of the color wheel. And for true contrast, we want colors that are very far apart on the color wheel. So for example, colors such as black and white, black are highly contrasted, black and white, where a dark gray and a black might not be as contrasted. This is an example of a dark gray. So these buttons are dark gray where the words are actually black, and the contrast on these is not significant enough, where this contrast is a little bit more. I have some other website examples of incredible contrast. This page is an IDEO page, the people who created design thinking. Incredible contrast. This right now we're focused on color, but you see so much contrast. And of course, this is beautiful black text on a very white background. Here is not so much contrast. This text is red on a very kind of muddled picture in the background, so it's really hard to read. White might have been a bit more effective. And even up here, this white text where there is even some white in the background can make it hard to see. So that contrast in color is not significant. Some other great contrast is on this website for GlaxoSmithKline. Incredible, nice white text on a bright orange background makes it very easy to see. And of course, the great CU website, University of Colorado, great white text on this very black banner makes it incredibly easy to read. I just picked Nestle because I read that it was a great website. And of course, you see good color contrast here with the white text on the dark green, and then the darker words on the white, pretty close to black, but kind of a bluish gray. So contrast in color is important. You want to make sure that the colors are far on the color wheel. Avoid colors that are similar, like green and blue. They simply don't have enough contrast. Our next form of contrast, and then we talked about black and gray, is contrast in size. So obviously larger means more important, but when you're talking especially about titles or headings, you want to really make the size count and the contrast really count when you're comparing it to the other text on the page. So again, we saw this site, which I think is this one. So this site, there's not a lot of contrasting headings. It's hard to know on this home page where the headings are. We can see one heading here, but like I can't tell if that's a heading or if this section is important. It's just there's not enough contrast in size. Where on this page, it is incredibly obvious that this is the title of the page. As I scroll down, I can tell that this, and I love their little feature there, that this is another heading. It's the title of this article. All of the titles are exactly the same size, and they're highly contrasted from the descriptive text. Excellent use of contrast in size and color on this page. Again, here, I would have liked to have seen the contrast in this size be a little bit more significant. I can't tell if that's a subheading or a heading or if it's important. It's not quite as clear. On this page, we can tell that this is obviously the title. Now, this is the home page, so there's not a lot of content text, but another great school website is the Valor website. Beautiful website. And as we click through this website and get deeper, where we can see more text for the content, excellent text for a heading, and it's greatly contrasted from the text of just the page. And this is an important thing to do as you're thinking about designing websites. And I believe our last content or section in contrast is contrast with text. So contrast with text can occur by making your text more bold, italics, or creating larger text. You can also change the alignment from left to right. So if we talk about, I'm going to skip that one for right now. So when we're talking about contrast with text, you can also contrast the font. And for that, what I mean is you want to contrast whether it's a serif from a sans serif. And a serif font is a font that has kind of points on the letters or curly cues, where a sans serif is very clean, very clear. If you look at your phone right now, most iPhones or phone text is sans serif, because the small text required for a phone doesn't really have the ability to have these curly cues, or it gets very hard to read. So if we take a look at contrast with text, meaning, again, it's contrast with bold, italics, larger, or contrast with font, then we can take a look at some of these websites we've looked at. Look at IDEO, significant contrast in font. This is very much a sans serif. There are no curly cues. It's a very clean font compared to a serif font with these flat marks on the top of every letter. Great use of contrast with font. Those are, and again here, contrast in font, we have this serif font, kind of these curly cues is some kind of Times Roman font compared to a very sans serif subheading. If we take a look, this is very much a sans serif font and pretty much used throughout that website. Contrast in font here. This is not only contrasting in size, but color. Both of them, however, are sans serif. And let's see if we have any other. Here's another. So this is a serif font. You can tell this is like a Times Roman compared to the heading, which is much larger, but it is very much a sans serif font. So those are the different ways you can contrast font. And then just to summarize contrast, it's one of the most effective ways to draw attention. They must really look different to truly contrast, and it must be obvious, so don't be a wimp. You can contrast using color, size, or text effects. For large amounts of text, you want to make sure that it is a sans serif font. So that's what this is saying right here. And that's it for contrast before we move on to repetition.